Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Pocono Raceway as it plays host to the 8th race of the 4th season of the Dark Horse Racing Series. Getting ready for the three corners here at this very famed 2.5-mile speedway. You're getting to see just exactly what is going to play off the heels of what was a very exciting Homestead Miami race last week. I'm Seth Cole alongside of Matthew Rodriguez. Qualifying currently underway with several drivers still out there taking time. But Matt, this is the second time that these drivers in the Indy cars have taken to Pocono Raceway, so they've got a little bit of a playbook to be able to adhere to from last year. What are some of the things these guys do you think are going to apply from last year now to today's race?
Well, I think really just the difficulty of the track here. Same as last season, it's really going to be a lot more of a high lane fest, as you would think. But passing is going to be a lot more deliberate. And I think when you have fresh tires, a lot of drivers are going to be trying to take advantage early on in the run, because later on in the run, I just don't think they'll have the grip to dive down to the bottom.
That's kind of interesting. We got Nick DeGroot up there at the top of the board. We're still waiting for a couple of drivers that we know are going to be fast to go out there and lay down their lap times, including pole sitter from last season, Robert Maleska III. He was actually top of the board in practice as well. But interesting coming into this race, because I looked at a lot of the guys that we've talked about pretty much in the first 7 races of the season. DeGroot, Bennett, Wagner, Maleska, a lot of drivers that have gotten wins here in the first few races on the schedule. This has kind of been an Achilles heel for all 4 of those drivers, and the fact that some of them didn't even make the start last season, and those that didn't fare all that well. So does Pocono become kind of the equivalent factor here tonight for some other drivers that we might be used to seeing inside the top 10 actually making their way up to the front?
I mean, I could easily see a lot of these guys. Henry Bennett, one of those guys I've been watching in practice, but I've just been scratching my head. How in the world have you been kind of driving this track? He's one of those guys I'm looking at. But always, there's kind of those dark horses in the field that we could talk about. I mean, remember Eric Schaus? He actually isn't in the field. But kind of think of that same mentality of guys that typically aren't strong at other tracks. Pocono isn't like other tracks. It's its own kind of breed where it's 3 different corners. So you can see some of these guys who maybe just they don't do that well at Homestead. They don't do that well at Watkins Glen. Maybe they can show out here.
It's interesting you bring up Eric Schaus, as you mentioned, not in the field tonight, but we can kind of glean some information off of his win last season, which was his only win on the year, and the fact that he started that race, a 21-car field, from the 14th position, was able to finish P1. So, kind of that old adage, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. That definitely should give some hope to guys that may be starting this race with fast race cars outside of the top 10.
Well, it's worth it to remember also last season that there was a little bit of late race contact between Eric Schaus and a few other cars. And that's kind of where we saw guys going for it, and they thought they had the room, but they just couldn't keep it stuck on the bottom, and they pushed up or really just kind of met in the middle. I think we're going to see a lot of the same tonight of just guys thinking they're having a lot more grip on the bottom than they actually do.
Wagner coming back out onto the racetrack, currently 5th on the board. I don't think he'll have enough time to come around, get the green flag to complete another lap. But, you bring up that contact, and something that you and I were observing here before we came on the air was not a whole lot of drivers really willing to venture down to the inside line. You can see the 5 distinctive grooves there with the seams. If you take that middle groove and make that number 3, that was pretty much where drivers are running. Anywhere from there up to groove 5, nobody ventured down to the first 2 grooves.
Absolutely. And that's really just because it just seems like the car just plants itself and it turns into a javelin and just goes straight ahead instead of turning. And you'll notice about in turn 3, some of these drivers will try and arc low, and they won't keep it exactly on that white line, but when they're coming around to the exit of turn 3, you'll notice some of these guys lift, maybe get out of the gas a little bit, try to swerve out of the way, because they just don't have trust that they're going to make that turn.
All finds complete, and by 11 one-thousandths of a second, Robert Maleska III is going to be starting on the pole alongside of Nick DeGroot. Both of those drivers, former winners this season. Maleska 3 wins and DeGroot his win back at the Kentucky Speedway. But it's also going to be interesting in the fact that, as I mentioned, the length of this track, 2.5 miles in length, that is the same length as Daytona, but this is not a super speedway. So it's going to take them quite a long time to complete a lap around this racetrack, which means a lot can happen in the span of one lap.
Absolutely. The guy I'm kind of looking at here, but he kind of had almost the same MO as last season, but just did a little bit worse here. Matt Wagner. Matt Wagner finished P2 last season here at Pocono, starting from the P13 slot today.
So we will see what he's going to be able to do, as a lot of fast cars actually I see are going to be starting back towards the rear of the field. Charles Teed was actually up there close to the top of the leaderboard in practice. And how about a guy that has been so close so many times this season, Rick Ravon? He's going to be rolling off from the 17th position. I believe he actually did not even take time here, so he's going to be back in quite a bit of traffic for the start of this one.
You know, I laugh to bring it up a little bit, but we have to look at Robert Milecka. I mean, for as much as his season can be considered, this is actually kind of defined as a slump for him. I mean, he's went 2 races. I mean, at Kentucky, he was outside the top 10. Homestead, he was P4. I mean, normally we see him up higher, maybe in the top 3. I know it's kind of crazy to consider it's a slump, but I mean, do you think he gets right back on it today, or?
I mean, we've had several drivers that we've interviewed during the course of the last couple of weeks, and they've even stated the competition has stepped up. I mean, there have been fights all through the field from front to back, and I think Milecka's feeling that just as much as anybody. A lot of races last season, he was dominant. He was out in front for a good portion of. Very often, he was usually in a zip code of his own. Now that's not the case. The DeGroots, the Bennetts, the Wagners, they've been able to reel him in and make a fight for the victory week after week.
And you have to admit, it's just very scary with the amount of talent. I mean, of course, you mentioned Ravon Bennett, DeGroot. I mean, actually, let's not even forget about DeGroot. I mean, DeGroot has really rallied back this season after kind of a dismal season 3. I mean, look at us. DeGroot and Milecka are tied for 3rd in the points.
Right now, the point standings coming into this race, you've got Rick Ravon, the points leader. Henry Bennett, with his 2nd win on the season last week, has jumped up to 2nd in points, 14 points back. As you mentioned, that tie between DeGroot and Milecka for 3rd place. Bear in mind that Milecka did miss a race a couple of weeks ago, so that certainly plays a factor into it. Matt Wagner currently in the 5th position, 42 points out. Bronson Stafford's still in the mix, 58 points out in 6th, and Gale Brooks has been very consistent this year. Currently sits 7th, 77 points out, and Gale Brooks was another driver that was actually looking like was having some very good consistent lap times in practice. Going to be rolling off from the 7th position in tonight's event. 100 laps, and I think maybe more so than any place, Matt, this might be the one track where pit road is going to play the huge deciding factor into the outcome.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, we obviously saw in the race that we had yesterday, different cars, different track, but right front being the killer, with this being such a flat track and almost these drivers running such a high lane. And unfortunately, this isn't really like the kind of real life tracks. Running the high lane will damage that right front even more than, hey, just running the bottom. I'd kind of be concerned maybe on a 30, 40 lap run if it's really going to kill that right front tire.
Yeah, not a whole lot of banking here either. Turn 1's got the most banking, 14 degrees, and that's not much. Turn 2's got 8 degrees of banking. Turn 3, 6 degrees of banking. The flattest turn here at this track. As the green flag is out, let's get racing in the Pocono Mountains as Milecka gets ready to lead a field that's spreading out 3 wide into turn 1.
Covey looks about 3 wide back there, but he thought better of it.
A car way up the track there. I think that's Mike Tellier in the white and blue machine. He was almost on the top of a 3 wide situation, as Nick DeGroot not going to let Milecka get away. He wants to lead the first lap of this race as they head to the tunnel turn.
Woo. Man, I'm just seeing the 3 wide here in some of these corners, and that just doesn't work in turn 2 at Pocono.
Is that Eric Peterson that almost looked like he was going to brush the wall there? That bright yellow machine. He's going to clear what's going to be now a 3 wide battle for the 7th spot. Mike Tellier, Gale Brooks, Kobe Moore in the mix of that. They all settle it out to single and double file down this front straightaway, and you're going to see a lot of moves made here. This is a very wide front stretch. Is that, I think, Rick Ravon? Yeah, he started at the back. He's working his way to the front in a hurry.
And it's worth noting that normally the admins kind of restrict the amount of track that you can use. I mean, no ducking on the apron or bottom line, but they have released the reins this week. They said that the front straightaway is fair game. I mean, you can go all the way down to that checkered flag portion down there in the bottom and make passes if you feel so brave, but the driver on the top side is not obligated to give you back their spot.
Rayvon kind of boxed in there with Bronson Stafford to driver's left. He had Mike Tellier just up ahead of him there, and now going to try and split the teammates up the middle there. That was a gutsy move. You see that at a super speedway, but not with Indy cars. That's usually something that can get a little dicey and usually not with positive outcomes.
I mean, I think he's kind of in that mindset. He sees them singling, filing out in front of him. He thinks he needs to go. Now, I don't know why he chose not to qualify, but, you know, hey, to each his own. Maybe he just wants to make it a little bit more impressive when he comes up the field.
Yeah, maybe. So far, starting back in the 17th position, has picked up 10 spots since the drop of the green flag inside the top 10 as Maleska tries the inside line through turn 3 to get the second position from Henry Bennett. Not quite going to be able to do it this time. Matt Widener looking on as Nick DeGroot opens up about 4, maybe 5 car lengths back to the battle for second place.
What a rally from Matt Wagner. I mean, 4 laps. Man started in 13th place, drove up 9 positions, all the way to P4. He is in striking distance of this lead.
And I mean, you talked about the fact that he is the driver in the field here in the previous Pocono race that had the highest finish with Eric Schaus, the previous race winner, not here. Matt Wagner, the runner-up, would have the most information about what the car is going to feel like and what he has to do in the closing stages of this race.
Man, I look back there on lap 4 in the beginning of the straightaway. I think that was Herrick, but Herrick decided to push it 3 wide on both the Smart IndyCar teammates, and looks like he may have hit the right front of Tellier. No actually damage or contact. Looks like it's going to cause a wreck out of that, but I mean, a lot of these guys, they're feeling that urgency. They're feeling like they have to go.
Obviously, you know, we were talking about this as well pre-broadcast about these drivers, especially off of turn 1, really pushing up the longer the run goes on, depending on the line that they choose on entry, and getting that outside wall with the right side of their machines with the chassis exposed. Actually, I think maybe Bronson might have brushed the wall there off of 2. I mean, with that chassis exposed, how much does that affect the race car for the remainder of the run as Stafford's actually up and into the wall a good bit there into turn 3?
Yeah, it looks like, I don't know if he maybe got a little bit too much draft, or maybe he wasn't expecting Kobe to check up that much, but looks like he almost like, kind of pulled an evasive maneuver. I don't know, but either way, he definitely got the losing end of that.
No doubt about that, as he's going to drop back to the 10th position, trying to get back Jim Herrick's 9th spot, and it's a bit of a gap back to Charles Teed, so an opportunity to recover. Henry Bennett coming off that second victory last week at Homestead Miami Speedway, looking now to tie Maleska for most wins on the season. He's now to the point. Maleska trying to take the second position on Nick DeGroot, and interesting here that we see Maleska, he's doggedly trying to get that inside line working in turn 3.
Absolutely. I mean, just kind of looking for some of these guys, and I see different strategies all throughout the field. We can tell where some of these drivers are kind of agreeing on things, where if you look at the entry of turn 1, most of these drivers enter on the top side, and they usually go almost to that white, like, kind of a barrier rumble strip there, but they don't touch it, where I'm seeing Maleska, he is pushing that left front down onto the rumble strip.
Right on board with him. You saw just how low he got. Trying to get the second position from Nick DeGroot. Looks like he may have the spot here off of 3. Nope, DeGroot going to battle back on the outside line. He's going to clear him before they get to the start-finish line. Rick Rayvon, though, he's now entered into the same picture as the race leaders. He's all over the back bumper of Matt Wagner and looking for 4th going into turn 1.
You know, it's kind of worth it to mention, but that factory-backed motorsports team, I mean, just look at them. Kind of Nick DeGroot, Henry Bennett running together, and, you know, kind of got Robert Maleska to break up the party here, but again, they have been running pretty much a hot streak these last few weeks.
Also got their teammate Kobe Moore back there in the 8th position. He's currently running about 3.5 seconds behind the race leader, as Rick Rayvon going to move up into the podium. Only took him 8 laps to work his way from 16th up to 3rd, and he's looking for more as he closes onto the back bumper of Nick DeGroot. Matt Wagner now looks to take advantage on Maleska to get the 4th position.
Now, here's what concerns me about that move. I mean, you see him just charging up through the field. Obviously, 17th second, impressive. However, I'm kind of looking at this, and I'm wondering how much he burnt up his tires doing this.
That would be the big question for me as well, because, you know, as we saw in practice, and we're kind of seeing here in race, for the most part, everybody is still running that middle groove through the corners. If you got a faster car and you're going to make a move, you're going to have to do it down on the bottom of the racetrack. We saw Maleska trying it earlier, and Rick Ravon has been using the inside line to make his forward progress. And to your point, don't have nearly as much banking down there, and you're going to heat up that right front a lot more running the shorter way around the racetrack. So if we continue in a long green flag run, it will be interesting to see just how far Rick Ravon can stretch it, as opposed to the others around him, as almost near contact between himself and DeGroot. Mike Tellier and another driver, Jim Herrick. That's over, I think, in turn 1.
Let's go ahead and take a look back at this.
Big hits for both of those machines.
Honestly, I'm kind of looking at the incident at the moment. I almost want to say Tellier came up.
Take a look here as Tellier's going to make the move. Herrick goes to throw the block. He was actually trying to make a move to the inside of Charles Teed.
It looks like both Herrick came down and Tellier went up, but it's just kind of coming into that danger zone. I mean, we saw these guys entering turn 1, where you need to be on that high line and you need to kind of avoid that shallow entry. You're going to turn into basically a really expensive lawn dart entering 1. I'm a little bit divided on that one. I understand trying to go for position, but man, I don't know how you would have entered that turn.
Did Herrick know that Tellier was there? Because it looked like he was focused out the front to be able to get the run and make the move on Charles Teed. Then you had Mike Tellier making the move on his inside. I almost wonder if Herrick thought that the 97 might actually back out of the 3-wide situation.
It could have been that, or again, maybe he just didn't see him. I mean, I'm kind of looking from Herrick's onboard, Herrick's cockpit, and I'm kind of seeing, I mean, hey, you see Charles Teed out to the right of your kind of field of vision. You're kind of focusing on that.
Tellier trying to limp that car back to pit road. Save the time spent if he were to call a tow. Undoubtedly, as you can see, the suspension issues, trying to yank that wheel to the left to get it to turn. That's going to have fast repair written all over it. Same will...
Man, look at that.
For Jim Herrick.
Look at that Herrick machine. He is cranking that wheel all the way to the right just to get it to drive straight.
Still trying to limp that thing around. He's losing a lap here under pacing, as the race leaders and the pace car are actually gone around him. And he'll bring that, it almost looks like a go-kart, to be honest, with no front wing and no rear wing, to pit lane. Pit road open. We got a number of drivers that have hit the pit road here. A couple of drivers electing to stay out, but Henry Bennett's going to give up the top spot to head for pit lane.
Yeah, it looks like at the result of this, it would be Herrick and Tellier 1 lap down. And obviously with Herrick kind of holding up the field there, that will shuffle out these pit stops a little bit, because some of these drivers, they couldn't pass him without getting a black flag.
2 drivers that elected to stay out, Nick DeGroot and Matt Wagner, so looks like they'll be the ones to lead us to green. Bennett wins the battle off pit road. Rick Ravon and Robert Maleska III are the top 3 leaving pit lane, so they will complete the top 5 when we go back green. 12 laps in, and theoretically, 10, 11 green flag laps. Do you like this call on the part of the 89 and the 11, or are they going to be sitting ducks on this upcoming restart?
Here's always my take is, if I have a chance to early in the race to get tires, get fuel, prep myself for a longer run, I always want to take that opportunity, just because, hey, I don't know when this next caution is going to be. I don't even know if there's going to be another caution. And this could easily make my 2-stop strategy just a 1 stop to the end of the race. Not saying that this is going to be a 1 stop, but hey, this could make my life easier later on down the line of adding less fuel on that final pit stop to get to the end. I'm not a big fan of it. I understand why they did it, but I'm not crazy for it.
Bear in mind that both DeGroot and Wagner were drivers that took part in the Pocono race last season, and as stated earlier, these would be guys that already have a playbook in place, have some ideas of strategy they can play out here during the course of this 100 lapper, and this may have been possibly a page that they saw somebody do something like this last season, or may have done it themselves last season and are trying to do it again. Could be a race-winning strategy even as early here as the first 15 laps of the race.
Ooh. I can see some differing strategies here easily.
Well, I mean, why don't we actually find out from the driver? See if maybe we can get inside the head of one of these guys and see what the strategy call is here. What are their plans for the upcoming restart? Let's see if we can dial up the second place running, Matt Wagner. Matt and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
We got you there, good buddy.
Well, man, you're running second right now. We see you playing a little bit of strategy, so we're kind of curious. 12 laps into this, most everybody hits pit lane to get fresh Firestones, but you elect to stay out. Is this about gaining track position, or do you have something in mind for a later strategy?
I have something in mind for a later strategy if the caution falls right, but I'm not going to say it during the broadcast in case somebody's watching.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. But, I mean, obviously we've seen that, as we expected at the initial start with everybody bunched up, things getting pretty crazy, a lot of slingshot moves. I mean, how is the car feeling out there, the ability to pass?
Oh, it's fine. I was just minding my time, and I saw Rick coming, wow, like bat out of hell, and he was moving, and I just let him by. It's able to pass. It's a great feeling, good car, good setup. I love it.
All right, Matt, we're going to go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. You're fine. we can stay here and go green.
No. Got to give you focus.
Pulling SRX here.
Yeah, you're fine, dude, bro. I'm just having a good time here with these guys, and just proud I get to race with Nick and Henry every week. It's been fun. It's been a nice turnaround for me, so I was hoping to keep the trend going. Here we go.
Nice to see some of the strategy here of some of these drivers just kind of fanning out, going about 2-3 wide here and back in the pack. But obviously looking up front, everyone's going to single file out here, just trying to keep a straight line, seeing if they can break away from the rest of this pack. As we look back here through the field, noticing that AJ Hobson, Covey Moore currently battling for that 8th position. Covey's got that inside line, which is not the preferred line, but AJ Hobson on that outside trying to make it work. Still looking at the front of the field, Nick DeGroot leads, but right now Matt Wagner's launching a battle with Henry Bennett. Henry's trying to see if he can make it work, pulls back in the single file. Looking back, Rick Ravon obviously trying to continue that good run, got a good pit stop out. He is one of the first cars on fresh Firestones, as Seth said it. Be Henry Bennett, who would be the actual first car on new tires. Now, you got to remember, Wagner and DeGroot are running a reduced fuel load here at the moment. They've got a lighter car, do have older tires. The older tires will probably come into effect about, I'd say about anywhere from 5 to 10, maybe 15 laps down the road. You may see those tires start to show their wear, but I think it will be, I'd say, adequately offset by the fuel load in that car. Now, that really depends on whether DeGroot and Wagner keep working together and kind of keep that maintaining of, I'd say, maybe just a draft alliance. I mean, if Henry Bennett pulls out, don't let him get to the back bumper of that next car.
I gotta wonder, too, here for Henry Bennett. I mean, just how much of a sense of urgency is it to get up here back to the front? Whoa, Rick Ravon nearly just was on first name basis with the outside wall off of 3 as he clears Henry Bennett for 3rd place. But, obviously, with these guys up here at the front, DeGroot and Matt Wagner, they're going to be at a bit of a deficit as far as fuel. If you're the 2 of Ravon, the 007 of Bennett, the 91 of Maleska, do you kind of let these guys cut the draft for you to save a little bit more fuel, make it even further on a green flag run?
That would be smart, but again, I think their strategy... behind Henry Bennett! Oh no, Ravon! Maleska's in the grass!
Save it, I think!
No, he's in the wall!
Oh man, hard hit with the left front for Robert Maleska III, who was the innocent bystander in all that contact.
Look at the car. He's knocked the steering out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crabbing.
How it kind of crabbed walked. Yes, exactly.
Look at his hands. Look at the wheel.
Wow.
Look at how far that thing's cranked to the right. Just get it to go straight.
And no caution coming out to save him either.
This is where it gets dangerous when you start slowing down, because then the rear end of the car can catch up to the front end and spin it out real fast.
Now, the saving grace is that this is a big track, but I even with the low amount of speed he had to carry there through 3 to make sure that thing was going the right direction, he's going to undoubtedly lose at least 1 lap. And oh, that is such a tough break because, like I said, the contact was between Henry Bennett and Rick Ravon. Maleska was kind of the innocent party trying to make his way by both machines, and he's the one that got the most damage out of it.
Let's kind of go back and review kind of Henry Bennett's car. I mean, we saw the damage that was on Maleska's car. Obviously had wing damage, but the front end was kind of knocked off, at least with steering wise. But looking at Henry Bennett's car, I'm not really seeing any damage on any of the kind of the floor panels, or I mean, even the bodywork looks fine. I am noticing a little bit of damage on the rear spoiler on the left side. That little kind of carbon fiber piece that I almost say accents the rear wheel. Looks like that has a little bit of damage. Looking back at Ravon, I don't know. It looks like Ravon actually is perfectly clean, which is surprising with him kind of sliding in the grass a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see if we end up having even a pit stop under caution, if there will be any type of repairs done on that 007. Robert Maleska III has returned back to the track, albeit 1 lap down, and he has used his fast repair, as have the 2 drivers that were involved in the first caution, Mike Tellier and Jim Herrick. I find it interesting here too, Matt. Wow. Yeah, let's try that one again. But I find things really interesting in the case of Maleska III, though, because when I was looking at his statistics from last season, his worst finish on the year, so we got another driver in trouble, Bennett. Bennett is binned it off of turn 2, and it's in the grass.
Yeah, it looks like he pushed a little bit too much out of 2. Looking back here, I mean, he didn't touch any of the rumble strips. I just wonder if that car lost a little bit of downforce of that damage in the rear.
And now he's coming to a stop on the racetrack. Let's see if that thing's going to get back to pit road. I don't know if he's trying to bring a caution out here or not. No oncoming traffic, so he is going to make it onto pit road. No yellow going to come out here for Henry Bennett. That's 2 drivers, the only 2 multi-time winners on the season that have run into issues here in the last 3 laps. But real quickly here, before anything else breaks out, I'll go back to my point about Maleska III. His worst finish last season was 31st, and that was at Iowa Speedway. His second worst finish was 10th place, and I know that people are thinking, well, 10th place isn't a horrible finish. When you consider the numbers he put up, it was kind of a mediocre run for him, and it was here at Pocono. So this has not exactly been a track that he's had good luck at in the past 2 seasons.
And you got to remember, I mean, Henry Bennett's had really bad luck here in the past few weeks. Obviously, I mean, you got to remember Watkins Glen, I mean, he was on track to really just dominate that race, had a connection issue, dropped him out of the race. And here, I mean, again, he was one of the front runners this entire race, and I mean, easily taken out by just, I almost want to say a miscalculation, just damage.
They bring up that Watkins Glen, with his win last week at Homestead. Had he not had the Watkins Glen issues, more than likely we'd have been talking about him as the points leader coming into this race, because he's still within striking distance with that victory, 14 points behind Rick Ravon for the top spot. But Ravon has, without a doubt, been the most consistent driver here in the first 7 races of the season, and he's going to move up another spot, put him P2 as he finally gets by the somewhat older tires of Matt Wagner. But very impressive here for both DeGroot and Wagner, how they've been able to keep themselves up here with 12-lap older tires than everybody else behind him.
Well, here comes my bigger question here, which is, I mean, obviously seeing the kind of misfortune of Maleska and Bennett, I mean, how much does that kind of spook some of these guys who maybe have a little bit of damage on their car? And then also, the second thing that makes me worried is, I mean, they had a strategy going on the pit road. How much does this change that strategy, and what do they have to do to kind of get back on it? Or are they really just hoping for a caution at this point?
Yeah, and you got to think, too, the field getting really spread out right now. We've got little battles here and there, battle for second, battle for fourth, but there's a lot of gaps between those battles and the next battle behind them. The likelihood of a caution coming out is slim to none. Bear in mind, though, we were rather spread out when we had the contact between Tellier and Herrick for our first and only caution up to this point. So, well, let's go a lap down. Henry Bennett a lap down. If we do not see a caution at this point in time, there's really no strategy for them to get back in the lead lap, is there?
I hate to say it, but I don't foresee a strategy for them to get back on the lead lap. I mean, obviously, they will most likely get back on the lead lap under green flag pit stops when the majority of the leaders come along, but I don't know.
Change up here for the 6th position, I believe it was. Charles Teed making his way around AJ Hobson, and you got to look at the point standings here now with what's transpired in the last 5 laps. You've got drivers inside the top 5 in the standings like DeGroot, Ravon and Wagner, I mean, those guys all came in first, third, and fifth in the overall points, but with Bennett and Maleska now finding themselves one lap down and outside of the top 10, there's other drivers like Eric Peterson, Gail Brooks. These are drivers that could take advantage, Jim Brooks as well, and be able to work their way up into the top 5 heading into next week.
I mean, it's kind of funny you mentioned, just drivers who've actually kind of lucked out with this situation here. Obviously, Nick DeGroot and Matt Wagner, they're just loving this because that was their main competition. Obviously, Rick Revon, extremely fast, but I mean, these two, as you hear, at least I heard over the radio, that Nick DeGroot's coming in this time to pit, and that's a bit early to me, to be honest.
Well, bear in mind that he stayed out under our only caution of the day, so no surprise that he would be pitting earlier than others. Matt Wagner, though, in the 11, well, he's running low, too. Looks like he's going to come in this time also. As, boy, you got to really get that thing mowed down. You got all of that access area to be able to get to pit lane. You got to make sure you don't put yourself into a false sense of security of, hey, I can attack this a little bit harder than I would expect to, because the last thing these drivers want is a speeding penalty, especially with 2 of their top 5 competitors in the points hitting issues here.
And it looks like Mike Tellier may have parked it for the night. Looks like he's got a little bit of right rear damage on that. Looks like the FRN Indy car. I'm not really sure what happened going back and looking here. Looks like he may have actually just... Oh, looks like Haisong may have just tapped him just a little bit and just sent the car on a round. Let me look at Haisong here to see if he has any front end damage.
No, Haisong looks fine. Take an onboard lap here with our race leader, Rick Ravon. And I doubt we're going to see him go into 6th gear, because 6th gear more of a draft gear, which drivers would use if they have someone cutting the slipstream up ahead of them. The more speed on the straightaway would be with 5th gear. So I'm going to go down to 4th gear there in turn 1. 14 degrees of banking based off of Trenton Speedway in Trenton, New Jersey. And going to remain in 5th gear here through the fastest corner. Turn 2, the tunnel turn, 8 degrees of banking. And now into the flattest corner, the 6 degrees, turn 3. And no downshift. Interesting there, because I was kind of wondering, obviously with stock cars, we'll see them downshift to usually 3rd gear and then bring it up to the high gear of 4th, but no downshift here for these Indy cars.
Well, that brings a few questions, which is, obviously is the in this kind of downshift range where it would make sense to not over rev the car and possibly, raise your temps. But here comes the next thing, which is right now he is leading. And right now he's got about a 2-second gap on Eric Peterson. I wonder if he's saving fuel. And obviously not downshifting or kicking down into a lower gear of higher RPMs. Going to save you a little bit of fuel there. And do you want to curse Eric Peterson, or do you want me to do it?
Go ahead. You do it.
Obviously, Eric, he has had a great run to start off here. Honestly, net gain. He has started second. He is currently running second. Hasn't had... I don't really know how to say it. He just hasn't had luck on his side in the past few weeks. But hopefully, obviously his kind of his teammate Eric Schaus managed to break it a few weeks, or managed to break his kind of no-win streak last season at Pocono. Maybe that kind of rubs off.
Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if I remember that one season ago here at Pocono, Eric Peterson was racing from a hotel room, didn't exactly have the best of internet available there, and end result, he was barrel rolling on the front straightaway, finished that race in the 21st position.
Yeah, he actually rehashed it to me, and he made it a little bit more clear than what we originally got, which is, I think he used the actual TV screen in the hotel room as the monitor he was racing on, which was a little bit interesting. But obviously, he's under better circumstances this season. You're really seeing what he can do at Pocono. Now, obviously, he's had the advantage of some misfortunes by both Bennett and Maleska, and obviously Wagner and the group being on their own strategy. But you got to wonder about some of these guys up front. Ravon, Peterson, and Stafford, if they have something up their sleeve.
Now, here's the thing with both Wagner and DeGroot. Mentioned just how big this racetrack is. When they came down, completed the green flag pit stops, they came out ahead of the race leader. So they are still on the lead lap, currently in the 11th and 12th position. So they don't have to worry about a caution saving them, because if this thing continues to go long green flag run, they will then cycle back up to the front when all the drivers that pitted about 20 laps ago come down pit road for their first cycle of green flag pit stops. On the flip side, though, you've got Maleska and Henry Bennett, who got trapped a lap down because of just how long it took for them to even get back to pit lane, let alone get the damage repair done when they finally got to their pit stalls.
Here's really the only thing that worries me about both DeGroot and Wagner's strategy. I mean, you're seeing them about a second apart, about 2 seconds apart from each other, and that's great and all, but right now, I mean, looking at how close the rest of the field is, and just seeing Rayvon, I mean, he is coming off of turn 3 right now, and they're passing start finish. Oh, my apologies. I'm looking at this map wrong, but they're entering turn 2 now. And Gary, or my apologies, Rick Rayvon, he is about less than about a quarter track behind them. I would want to be on the route and just kind of drafting to see if I can get away from him, or at least buy myself as much breathing room as possible. And, again, you save a little bit more draft or a little bit more gas that way.
Boy, things are getting really sketchy here from 4th back to 6th. That's Charles Teed in the 50. The white and green machine behind him is AJ Hobson, who I think actually did get the wall off of turn 3 on the last lap, and then the dark green car behind is the 51 of Jim Brooks, and there was almost near contact between Teed and Hobson coming off of turn 1. So keep an eye on these guys, as there's a lot of side drafting going on.
Yeah, I'm kind of watching that, and I'm a little bit concerned because obviously older tires, and laps winding down. I saw someone blink out there.
Not sure who that would have been, as right now you've got the top 3 all running within 4 seconds of each other. This battle here is going on over 6.5 seconds behind the race leader, Rick Rayvon. Kobe Moore trying to reel these guys in that 7th position, and that's Maleska the 3rd there in the 91, the lap down machine, trying to cut his way through traffic. Jim Brooks having the 51 to pit lane. This is interesting because most of the time at our 1.5 mile races this season, it's been Jim and Gail Brooks who have played the strategy of staying out the longest. It looks like Jim may be one of the first drivers trying the short pit strategy here.
I mean, you got to wonder about the father-son duo there, and typically they communicate on strategies together, but it looks like differing strategies as Gail stays out on the track and Jim comes in.
We'll see how that plays out for both of them. Gail was running in the 8th position before the 51 dove to pit road, and Jim was running, as I mentioned, in the 6th spot. So we'll see if it's going to translate to the advantage of the 71, staying out the extra couple of laps, or the 51 with coming to pit road as soon as he did. Nobody else, though, ducking on pit lane of those that stayed out. And we don't really know what the fuel window is for these drivers either, so it will be interesting to see just how far they decide to stretch it, because that will obviously play big dividends into the numbers later on in this race on who can make it on fuel and who cannot.
I mean, just basing it off of what we saw out of both Wagner and DeGroot, 26 laps. Now, they were aided by about 3 or 4 laps of pacing, so I really wonder if maybe some of these drivers go about anywhere from 18 to 20, maybe 22 laps if they really try and save, but I'd be looking around that 20 mark of maybe being concerned. Now, we'll see as more of these drivers go on longer in the run who pitted that last caution, and we'll be able to get a more accurate number.
Saw Rick Rayvon dive onto pit lane, so that was at the completion of lap 24, so we're starting to get a general idea. It might be around the 25-26 mark the furthest these drivers can make it, especially if they've got the 8 of draft. Rick Rayvon didn't really have much draft there out in front because the guys he was drafting with of Nick DeGroot and Matt Wagner, they had dove onto pit road about 18 laps ago. Like we've got Scott Rankin here in the booth with us here. Now, Scott, I mean, the green flag pit stops beginning, and with the pit stops taking place here, if we have a target lap of around 25-26 laps, that would mean that these guys are going to have to come to pit road at least 2 more times before the conclusion.
Yeah, and ultimately, remember what I say every week as well. You want to push those early stops, especially the first 2 of the 3, back as late as you possibly can. What that's going to do is that's going to create a little bit of opportunity with your different pit windows. I'm actually just starting to get some calls on the radio that AJ Hobson's on his way to pit road this lap. I think Eric Peterson just said he might be on his way to pit road as well. So whilst my data sort of catches up here, look.
Peterson is on pit lane there in the 36. Bronson Stafford going to stay out an extra lap. Going to be interesting to see about Hobson when he comes to pit road, if they spend a little bit of extra time working on the right side of that machine, as he did pancake it pretty good off of turn 3 about 5-6 laps ago. He's on pit lane now. Kobe Moore, Dylan Moskowitz coming to pit lane. So only 3 drivers pretty much left to complete this cycle. If we do stay green as well here, I'm looking at Henry Bennett and Robert Mileska III. I mean, these guys are about 4-5 laps for Mileska, about 8-9 laps for Bennett, off sequence from everybody else.
They'll have a number in line.
Yeah,
I think they're basically saying, we know that we're going to have to run at these different windows and these different pit stop basically. That's what they're thinking in their mind, is that they're going, okay, I know that this race is going to have 2 more stops in it. I'm going to split it up nice and evenly. Knowing Pocono, there's a good option for a little bit of tire fall off just because of the way that the corners are all different set up. The other thing is that even though the draft may be faster, they're not happy running in the draft. Something's on. They've got a plan going on, but don't just immediately look at them and go, oh, well, they're off cycle, you know. It could be playing to a specific plan for these guys.
Haisong now going to be the interim race leader. He's still yet to come to pit lane, as is Gale Brooks running right there behind him. Looks like those two may be diving for pit road this time by. And Gale Brooks trying to see if he can jump the gun before they even get to the commitment line. Try and pick up a spot that way. It's a little bit risky, but it may pay off.
Yeah, I mean, pit road entry it's one of those spots. I mean, when do you do the majority of your braking around a track like this? It's on pit road entry, so skill on the brakes. It's so difficult to get these Indy cars wound up, especially if they're in an Indianapolis-style configuration with their brakes and the way that they set those up. Pocono's a little bit different, though. Pocono, you're trying to use a little bit of brake right throughout the lap. So getting onto pit lane, these guys will already have a little bit of a warmer brake temperature, and they'll get to pit road a little bit easier.
Nick DeGroot, Matt Wagner, of course, off sequence. They were on pit road about 14 laps ago, and as Matt mentioned, they came out pretty much running laps by themselves, no draft to aid their speeds whatsoever, and it does not cycle them up to the front. Rick Ravon is going to be the leader, about 2 seconds back to Nick DeGroot in second, 4 seconds back to Matt Wagner, with Eric Peterson and Bronson Stafford completing the top 5 with this cycle of pit stops. DeGroot and Matt Wagner, however, based on the numbers that we have, they're going to be back on pit road somewhere in the next 10, 11 laps.
Yes, around there. They may even be doing a whole bunch of fuel saving on this run. They wanted to cycle themselves out. They wanted to see how What I'm thinking in the back of my mind is that they wanted to let the fuel cycles sort of cycle themselves out. They may have pushed a little bit harder. They may have blown a little bit more fuel out. I mean, it depends on the earlier race scenarios and those sorts of things. The benefit of Pocono is one of these really good tracks where you do get a lot of field separation as well. So cautions generally at Pocono tend to be a lot lower.
Battle for 6th place here between Charles Teed and Jim Brooks. And the best case scenario right now for both Mileska and Bennett would be if a caution were to come out right here, because they are actually scored on the tail end of the lead lap at this point in time. Time's running short for Mileska, though. He'll be on pit lane in the next 2 to 3 laps. Henry Bennett a couple of laps after that, and that would then put them back a lap down, and they'd basically be battling once again for the free pass position should we get a caution at that point in time.
I'm going to do some ride-alongs with Robert, because I just want to see how much he is saving. I don't think he's saving in any stretch of the imagination. I think he's pushing. So I think that he's picked up a lap number that is his minimum pit stop window to get home. In actual fact, he's just gone purple in the second sector on that last lap. So that means he was the fastest car, fastest sector that we've seen for a good while in that stretch. So it would not surprise me if we were to see Mileska go absolutely blindingly quick here. He's rolling it up. He's on the pit road right now.
So this is going to be his second green flag pit stop, theoretically, although first time coming to pit road under green flag conditions with a car at 100%. Of course, had that contact when Rick Ravon and Henry Bennett got together, and he was the innocent bystander, getting the left side of his machine into the steel guardrail down the Long Pond straightaway. And he's going to now fall a lap down to Rick Ravon, who comes down the front straightaway here to complete the 44th lap of this race, putting lap 45 on the board. So we're nearly halfway through this race, and I don't want to put the commentator's curse on him, obviously, but we've documented on just how consistent Rick Ravon has been during the course of this first half of the season. He's currently the points leader as a result, but he has not gone to victory lane. With how things have worked out right now, Nick DeGroot and Wagner off pit sequence, Bennett and Maleska currently way off sequence after having damaged machines. It's looking like Rick Ravon's race to lose.
Yeah, and I definitely say that. And look, to be perfectly honest, we said it the last week as well, that Ravon's just been going from strength to strength to strength. That guy knows exactly how to manage himself. He knows exactly what to do. And I actually think this is one of the few guys that is really at every stage, every lap, he's actually thinking about the long-term plan. There's not a lot of opportunities where Rick Ravon actually settles down and gets racing and isn't thinking long-term. I think we saw that last week, though. I mean, he got caught out in traffic. He got caught out with accidents. You know, things weren't going his way. He had to get aggressive, and he did so. And he made a phenomenal run back through the field to really make sure that he would still walk away with points leads and grab a whole bag of points. So that was very, very important in terms of his championship standings. And look, I mean, if you have a look right the way down the field, there's not a lot of other drivers that would be sitting down and going, okay, this guy is capable of running the long-term race. Stafford's another one of them. DeGroot is really, really good at it. Matt Wagner's phenomenal at it. And Robert Maleska III is probably the best in the field. And again, it's those top 5, right? These guys that are playing themselves to the front with these phenomenal IndyCar brains.
And you know, obviously, I mentioned this top of the program.
I was just going on board. I've been watching on board with Henry Bennett. He is saving a little bit of fuel. He's trying to extend that pit window as long as he can too, Seth.
So he's in from the 13th position. He's obviously going to lose a lap here. Here comes the 2 down the front straightaway, but depending on what happens in the next 25 laps or so, could find himself back in the lead lap, maybe get himself a break with a caution coming out. Got a battle actually brewing here for 3rd place, I noticed too. Eric Peterson trying to get the draft on Matt Wagner's. They went way down to the inside of the front straightaway. That's the brewing battle for 3rd place, but if Rick Ravon pulls this off, it will be back-to-back seasons where the race winner at Pocono started from outside of the top 10. Last season, Eric Schaus rolled off from P14, and we don't know the circumstances of why Rick Ravon didn't set a time in qualifying, but he started this race all the way back dead last, 17th place, and worked his way up to the front. So I don't know what it is about Pocono, but track position just doesn't seem to really be that much of a factor as it usually is at a lot of our other mile-and-a-half tracks.
I'll give you the lowdown for it. 3 corners, 3 different styles of corners, right? So you ultimately know there is no way for a driver to be the perfect driver in all 3 corners. They all require different lines, different setups, different applications of the throttle. Ultimately, I would expect you to be really, really good at one of the corners and maybe middle of the pack at one of the other corners. You know, you're going to have a great corner, you're going to have a middle corner, and you're going to have a bad corner. That's generally the way that Pocono plays itself out, where you're going to feel a little bit unsteady, unstable. The other thing is, Pocono is one of those tracks that you can just overtake at will. I think Rick Ravon did probably the best thing for his race by starting at the rear end of the field, and the reason actually for that is keeping an eye on Wagner. I think Peterson's got him here.
Indeed he does. Down into turn 1. Looks like Wagner may just back out of this and let Peterson have the spot, so move the 36 up to P3.
So these guys need to work together now and they'll catch up ahead. But Pocono is just one of those tracks where it's so wide and there are different ways to run each of the corners as well, that if you give yourself the ability to run multiple lines and multiple different corners, you can make overtakes really, really easily. And Ravon would have just been playing his cards very close to his chest, being really, really patient, making sure that he's good on those fuel numbers as well. And I mean, that's the sort of drives that we've seen from Ravon. He's aggressive when he needs to be, and he's patient when he needs to be as well. Wow, Wagner's in!
This is a lot earlier than we were expecting him to come to pit lane, about 3-4 laps earlier. Could be part and parcel, though, of the fact that he was able to stretch it further before because he actually had a lot more traffic around him, so he was able to save a lot more fuel in the draft. I think he ran a good portion of that last run all by himself, so would have been using up more fuel.
So that says to me, okay, because I was actually having a look at when Robert Maleska and Henry Bennett actually pit. Remember, Henry Bennett got to the race win last week as well. He was ecstatic, wrapped with that one. It was a really, really good drive. What that said to me when Henry Bennett pit was he was trying to give himself the option of if he found draft buddies that he could get to the tail end of the race. I don't think it's played out that way for Henry Bennett. I honestly don't think that he's going to play himself back into this race in terms of fuel strategy, but it just might. Whereas Milezka is definitely dead on fuel strategy. Milezka is definitely going to make 2 stops from here. He can't. For him to make it home, he will fall so far back in pace that it won't matter. So Milezka's going to be going as hard and as fast as he possibly can.
Talked about Rick Ravon starting this race from 17th. How about Charles Teed, our winner from Iowa last year? He's up in the 5th position and started this race just ahead of him in 16th place. So that's 2 drivers that started pretty deep in the field that have made the most of it here halfway through this race, up there inside the top 5. As no surprise, Nick DeGroot diving onto pit road now in the 89. He and Wagner on the same strategy. This all going back to their decision on lap 12 to stay out when we had our only caution, so they are way off sequence from the rest of the field.
Look, ultimately, when I come to Pocono, the thing that goes through my head is I think you have to pit every time that there's a caution. Because Pocono is just one of those tracks whereby, look at the field spread now. The chances of there being a caution are so low at this point in the race that they've thrown away all opportunity to have that track position strategy play out. Ultimately, they're pinning their hopes on maybe potentially another caution. Alternatively, I think a lot of the other cars are going to spend just a little bit less time on pit lane. It's going to be close in terms of pit lane strategy. Everyone's here. That's the interesting part about Pocono as well. Everyone's got a strategy that's viable here, and that's the best part.
When we talked with Matt Wagner there under that caution, asking him about the decision to stay out, he told us it was all part of a greater plan. It was going to be something that would play out later on in the race. He wasn't going to tell us what it was, but I'm very curious to see if it's going to work out for him. Oh, man, big hit there with the outside wall. Jim Brooks in the 51. I was getting a little bit concerned about him running in the wake of Charles T because it was looking like he was carrying way too much speed off the corners, and you can see that seems to have affected his race car. That car did not look very steady on the entrance to turn 1 either.
I'm just wondering, I'm just having a look back at that. I'm not necessarily sure that he did actually catch the wall. I think he might have caught it. Yeah, no, he just manages to dodge it, so it's very, very close. I think his tires, he's definitely struggling for a little bit of grip at the moment, so it's not going to be the most easy car to handle as it stands. So, look, I mean, yeah, he's got a lot of work to do to gather that car back up and get himself. He's going to be lacking confidence right now as well, which is going to translate to a loss of speed. So he's going to find some confidence back in that race car.
You know, it's interesting because we talked about how low the banking is here at Pocono. You've got 14 degrees over in 1, 8 degrees based off Indianapolis in turn 2, and then 6 degrees based off the Milwaukee Mile over here in turn 3. You remember when we go to the mile and a half, and especially the 2-mile tracks, we were told this back in the season opener at Michigan about when you get longer into a run as that fuel starts to evaporate, the back end of the car gets a lot lighter. Could that be translating to why we're seeing some of these handling issues off the corner, because there's not a lot of banking for that right rear to lean on, and the back wants to snap around?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, ultimately, these cars here at this sort of a circuit, they run closer to a road-going configuration. Obviously, still weighting, you know, the downforce as towards one side as they normally would for an oval. But because of the styling of all 3 corners, it's basically closer to a road setup, and then you're gonna just offset things a little bit just to try and help you through turn 1. Yeah, look, I mean, again, like I said, it comes back to that thing of we've got 3 entirely different corners, and the reason that I love Pocono as a racetrack is exactly that. The cars drive different on all 3 corners. You're constantly fiddling, constantly trying to tell yourself, I've got to adjust my line here, because it just doesn't work. It's the best way to practice and prepare for Pocono by not actually... So if I said to you, you got to prepare for Pocono, but you cannot do any laps on Pocono, I'd be going to road courses. Particularly road courses have some sort of banking, so Zandvoort's a really, really good one. A couple corners there that have banking on it. It's going to teach you to drive the cars in really nice ways. And then alternatively, I'm going to look at running laps at tracks when I do my oval practice at circuits that have multitudes of different layers of banking. So, you know, I'm going to go and do some at the high bank circuits, you know, some at the intermediates, maybe even some laps at Bristol may even help. You know, Bristol's probably a little bit aggressive, but it's all there and it's all relevant. And it's one of those circuits that's best prepared for by knowing what you can and what you can't do with the car, ultimately. And that helps to prepare you for what you're going to encounter during the race.
Number of drivers are it's about 5 to 7 laps away from when they're going to have to be hitting pit road again. Got a good battle closing up for 4th place. Charles Teed looks back and sees Jim Brooks. AJ Hobson is starting to close in on these guys as well. So maybe a 3-man fight for spots up inside of the top 5. A little bit further back, Jeff Highsong being reeled in by Gale Brooks. However, when I look back here before at what was looking like it was going to be a battle for 9th, Gale Brooks slid the car through 3 and really overcooked that right rear tire.
Keep your eyes on Jim Brooks. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So Charles T is actually filing into pit road. Just as you went to talk about the battle behind, I was just like, Jim's actually just found a whole bunch of pace right now, and he's actually really creeping up. And it's because AJ Hobson and Charles T were both heading to pit road. So Jim Brooks able to run longer than these guys. This is a difficult scenario for Jim Brooks. I think he's got to cover off AJ Hobson by coming to the pits this lap. It means that he compromises his overall race strategy and he loses some of those options. But the difficulty is that the AJ Hobson gets that free draft and he gets to start really creeping up on Charles Teed. Then that means that Jim Brooks is probably going to lose that spot. Those guys start working together. That means that Jim is just going to lose that draft. So yeah, he does come to the stop and Bronson Stafford's going to come along with him.
You know, it's interesting there as Rick Ravon stays out an extra lap, and we see those drivers here and now inside the top 3 hitting pit road. All 3 of those cars that were on pit lane that last lap, Hobson, Teed, and Peterson, they're all teammates out of Dark Horse Racing. This is not a super speedway, but kind of reminds me of how a super speedway works with all the team cars coming down together on the same lap.
Well, I mean, yeah, and you got to remember for Teed and Hobson, that was planned for them because they were so close together. Ravon's going to shuffle himself in this time by, but he's got such a huge margin now. I think he's still going to assume the race lead. The thing for Ravon is that actually at the end of the day does not matter what lap he come into the pit stop. And the reason for that is he wasn't in anyone's draft. Anyone else wasn't getting the draft away from him. So his pit stop really doesn't affect the running order. The worry that I would have for Rick Ravon, which is why he's probably covering these guys off, is because he just wants to make sure he's keeping touch. He's managing his race gap to the guys like Nick DeGroot, to Eric Peterson that were just behind him, and Bronson Stafford as well. He's lost a lot of eyesight on Nick DeGroot, Eric Peterson, so that him pitting now, I think he's gone as far as he possibly can, but at the same time, I think as soon as he saw Stafford pit, I think he had to come because he really needed to keep the measure of everybody else.
With less than 40 laps to go, now pretty much everybody that has either pitted or are about to pit, they're just going to have to make one more trip to pit lane. They should be good to make it the rest of the way on fuel. Covey Moore inheriting the top spot in that 15 will stay out an extra lap, and he's the only driver with the exception of Matt Wagner coming into this race that finished in the top 5 last season. 3 of the drivers that were top 5 finishers last year did not take the green flag here tonight. The race winner Eric Schaus, 4th place finishing Benjamin Combs, and 5th place finishing Alexander Van de Sant. So I've actually been surprised, too, that we haven't seen a little bit more speed out of Covey Moore, but maybe he's hoping for maybe a caution miracle to take place here, gain him some track position, or maybe planning for something a little bit later on in terms of taking on less fuel than everybody else on the final pit stop.
Yeah, I actually feel like that's what Covey's targeting, is because he wants to assume that track position later on. The other thing that it says to me, if you have a look at Covey Moore's season as a whole as well, he hasn't had the most quick, reliable season. I think he's found himself a little bit more buried within the pack than he would have necessarily liked. And ultimately, I don't really think that he's had the opportunity to show us exactly how good he is so far this season. And it's really good to see him, especially over the last couple of rounds, because you remember last week out as well, we started to see flashes of Covey Moore as well. So I think he's starting to piece things back together again, and we're starting to see the strength that Covey's definitely got available to him. I think there's still a lot more to come from him, and he's probably one of my drivers to watch towards the back end of the season.
5 starts so far this year, 4 finishes inside the top 10, but still searching for his first top 5 here in Season 4, as he'll now turn the race lead over to Gale Brooks in the 71. Bear in mind that out of all the drivers on the last round of green flag pit stops, Gale actually stretched it the furthest, so no surprise to see him doing the same here on this run. Eventually, when he hits pit road, though, he'll be turning the race lead back to Rick Ravon.
Yeah, and Ravon's now a little bit, and remember what I was talking about, he wanted to make sure that he was managing that gap to everybody else. So Nick DeGroot come to pit road on lap 53 to 54. So ultimately, that's when he boxed. He knows that he has 47 to go from there. He's trying to get home, and his targets are at least get to that 25 window. May need to save a little bit of fuel before he's fine, right? Okay, so that's his scenario. Rick Ravon doesn't need to save any fuel. If he wants to push every single lap from here to the end of the race, he can absolutely do that. That's totally fine. Is that going to be more ahead of Rick Ravon? No, it's not. Okay, my timing's... Okay, that's a lot better. My timing screen was just playing around with me. Okay. So, yeah, from Rick Ravon's standpoint, and it'll be the same for Gale Brooks. Both of these guys don't need to save fuel. It'll just be push, push, push. It'll be the same for Peterson, and it'll be the same for Bronson Stafford. They know that they've got an extra few laps worth of fuel. In fact, in the case of De Groot to Peterson, it's 7 laps, and De Groot to Bronson Stafford, it's 8 laps. So, De Groot is playing with fire in terms of his fuel numbers. And if some of those guys, if Peterson and Stafford start to work together and crawl back onto him, I think he's dead in the water. But at the same time, if they slot back in just ahead of him, that may save his race strategy. So keep your eyes on that one as well.
But what's interesting here as well is guys like Nick DeGroot and Matt Wagner, while they are off sequence, they only have to come to pit road one more time as well. They'll be having to probably pit somewhere around 22, 23 laps remaining, whereas most of the rest of the drivers in the field, they won't have to pit until somewhere in the 13 to 15 laps to go range.
Just keeping an eye on things as well. You can remember Matt Wagner, in terms of strategy and the way things are playing out, Matt Wagner's still in this. He's up to P6, and he's attached to both Eric Peterson and Bronson Stafford. So from Matt Wagner's standpoint, right now, he'll just be chilling out here. He'll just be looking to try and save as much fuel as he possibly can and reattach himself to these guys in terms of race strategy. Then when they pit, he's going to burn. He's going to burn as hard and as fast as he can. Gale Brooks on pit road as well. So, look, I mean, Matt Wagner's definitely got an opportunity. I think De Groot is definitely the guy that's on struggle street. He's closest to Rick Ravon, and again, he's got opportunities, but if this pack behind him sorts itself out, start working together, he's in a real rough spot, but Matt Wagner's not. So,
well, this race has not been without incident, but we've only had one caution come out during the course of these 67, now going on to 68 laps. We nearly just had our second one there in that battle for the third position between Peterson and Stafford. I'm not sure if they made contact or not, but it was awfully close, and that would have been devastating for both of those drivers who, I mean, for Bronson Stafford, he had that streak where he had 2 back-to-back finishes outside the top 15. Eric Peterson, we already documented the struggles he had last season, a much better place this year, tied for 8th in the point standings, and now trying to see if he can finish up beside the podium for the first time in a long time, but those good performances nearly went south for both of those drivers a couple of corners ago.
yeah, I'm just having a look back at it. I don't think there's any contact. I think there's enough of a space in between these guys. So, yeah, there's no contact. They miss each other by inches, very, very small margins. So they both know what they're doing. They're both driving a really strong race. And, I mean, Peterson wants to lead this pack at this point in time. And I think Stafford's just going to let him, especially with how aggressive that move was. He's comfortable. He wants that to happen. So, then again...
As the inside there will clear off of turn 1. So they'll continue to exchange that third position back and forth. Now, obviously, as you said, no contact between the two. Two drivers that would have loved to have seen the contact made to bring out a yellow flag would have been Maleska the third and Henry Bennett, because right now they are scored on the lead lap, but they are about, well, actually, I think Maleska may have to pit either this lap or the next lap. Henry Bennett about 2 laps from now will probably have to duck onto pit lane, and again, that will cycle them off the lead lap.
Yeah, but, well, actually, here's the thing. Maleska's actually at the back of a chain of 4 cars at this point in time, so I think he's saving enough fuel that he's going to get himself to those target laps. That will be his goal now that he's been attached to these guys. I've kept an eye on a track map as well. I think he's been attached to these guys for a long enough period of time. The other thing is, Henry Bennett's only a couple seconds in the rearview mirror from Robert Maleska as well. He's close to attaching himself to this pack, but I think Bennett's been saving a lot of fuel. Initially, when I saw him come out, I think he was right around this group, and then the pits, everyone else sort of pits. So I think Henry Bennett's played himself back into things in terms of pit lane strategy. So Bennett, I think, is good. Maleska's making himself good now.
See how it all plays out here as we're closing in on 25 laps to go here at Pocono Raceway. Rick Ravon has been the class of the field after taking the race lead. He holds over 4.5 seconds back to Nick DeGroot, Bronson Stafford, Eric Peterson, and Matt Wagner currently.
Maleska's in, so that's it. He's got to pit again. He won't make it.
And this says to me, this was about 27 laps in the row. This says to me he can't make it from here.
Yeah.
He'd be, what, 2 laps short? of
Yeah,
making
1
it
to
the
2 laps
finish?
short. So he's gonna have to come. He's either just gonna have to save like crazy, hope for the caution. Here's the thing: when you're in this sort of a position from Robert Maleska's, you have to drive as if your race is out of your hands, right? All you can do is focus on the things that you control. Because if you focus on all of the things that you cannot control, you're focusing on a whole bunch of things that you can't influence, right? What he's got to do is he's got to keep his mind on what he can do to get himself back into the race. And from here on out into the race, I think he's just going to turn it down and make sure that he can make it on field. And then if that caution happens and he gets played back into things, all of a sudden he gets let off the hook. Pit lane strategy, especially with the final, it depends where the final caution flag comes. He may just get back onto the lead lap and he may be left with a shot. Who knows? You know, we've seen Maleska's pace is strong when he needs it to be strong. So right now he's got an uphill fight, but he's got to make sure he has an opportunity.
Saw Matt Wagner make the pass on Eric Peterson, so move him up to 4th place. Peterson back to the 5th position, as now looks like Henry Bennett's backing out of the throttle and he's hitting pit road this time. Right now with him, well actually no, he might have just been backing off the throttle to save some fuel.
No, Bennett's just cycled through, so Bennett's just come out.
Oh, yep, you're right. Okay, so with him pitting, though, I mean, he ran about 27 laps, I think it was there. So he's of the thought that that was his last pit stop of the day, I think. I think he would be a driver that would be...
He'll make it happen.
Yeah, so he's thinking about at least just finishing on the lead lap. I don't know if he'll really pick up a lot of spots with this strategy. I think that most drivers, when they duck onto pit lane here for their final stop, they'll still be able to leapfrog him, but... we've seen stranger things happen. If Bennett is able to at least keep himself on the lead lap when all these other drivers complete their pit stop in the closing stage and the caution comes out, he doesn't have to rely on a lucky dog to get himself back in the lead lap. He'll be caught back up to everybody else.
Yeah, and the other thing is, what Bennett's race is right now is it's against Maleska, right? So ultimately, if Maleska has to make another stop, Henry Bennett gains 1 spot. That's a win, right? That is to be a championship contender, these kinds of races do happen. You have to minimize the damage that you can possibly do to your championship hopes. So what this will be, from Henry Bennett's standpoint, is he's sitting down and he's saying if he makes it from this point, picks up 1 spot, it's over Maleska, so even in a bad round for him, he still beats Maleska. That's a great finish for him in terms of what he could do, right? Whereas Maleska, I think Maleska's just overdriven tonight. I think him missing that fuel window by 1 lap is a big issue, because if he doesn't miss that fuel window by 1 lap, he beats Henry Bennett here. Not by much. I think these guys will fight it all the way out to the line, but he does miss that window, and that is a big problem for him. The other opportunity here for Maleska is he's in a pack right now. He's got a really strong opportunity to save a lot of fuel, and everyone else is starting to serve their final stops because they know they're in the window.
That window is open. Saw Matt Wagner pit the lap before. Nick DeGroot and Charles Teed pitting this time around. You bring up a really good point there as well about picking the battles based off the circumstances. For Bennett, he's realizing it's kind of a mano-a-mano between himself and Maleska of who gets the best finish here today, because, you know, based off the IndyCar point system, that one position, those couple of points that you gained here at Pocono, could be a huge difference maker into the championship battle when we get to the season finale at Indianapolis.
That's what you got to think about, is that at the end of the season, if you lose by a couple of points, I would be pointing back to this round. And I wouldn't necessarily go, oh, I finished outside the top 10 at this round. I would be going, I could have just finished 1 place higher. And it's particularly for Maleska, who's had some phenomenal starts so far this season. I think Bennett's... We've just seen the first flash in the pan in terms of Bennett's real pace and real abilities last week. And he's got to be targeting, you know, top 5 finishes every week, I think. I don't think Bennett needs to go out there and win every race. I don't think that's the best thing for him to be thinking about. I think he just needs to be finishing as best as he possibly can every week with a minimum target of P5, and that'll give him a shot at the tail end of the season. Whereas Maleska, we've seen a couple of horrid rounds from Maleska. We haven't seen some great rounds. Maleska needs to now start turning the wicker up a little bit, and I think he's going to take it back to Rick Ravon, because Ravon's just been quick and consistent, and it's that second part that has been the differential here.
Yeah, both Maleska and Bennett going to be losing some pretty valuable points to Rick Ravon as things stand right now. Ravon looking for his first win on the season, which would make him the fifth, I believe, different winner in the first 7 races on the year. No correction, it'd be the 4th different winner. Oh, I was right, 5th different winner in the first 7 races on the season. I'll get it right eventually here.
What? Maleska's won 2? Who's the other double
3,
winner?
Bennett's won 2.
Oh, there you go, okay.
Wagner and De Groot have each won 1 apiece.
Yeah, so look, I mean, it's exactly what I said. You know, Maleska's come out and he's won races, but I think it's been the races where he hasn't won that have been some big question marks over Maleska, and those are the questions I want answered next week from Robert Maleska. Is can he? He was consistent last season. He came out and absolutely dominated consistently last season. I think the competition stepped up here this season.
Maleska's teammates hitting pit road there, Jeff Heisong and Dylan Moskowitz, both have had relatively quiet days. Jeff Heisong at one point was running up inside the top 10 around the 8th position, but then he kind of faded out, and Dylan Moskowitz has been very rare that we've seen him up inside the top 10 here today, been kind of hovering around 11th through 13th for the majority of this one. Looks like some more drivers on pit lane, yeah. Bronson Stafford in, Kobe Moore is in. I mean, obviously all these drivers trying to stretch it as far as they possibly can to take on the less amount of fuel. Others, though, feeling that the undercut with the fresh tires might be more of an advantage. I think for Rick Ravon, though, he's more the latter than the former. He's going to try and have as short a pit stop as possible.
Well, the thing is, from Rick Ravon's perspective, is that he's got such a big lead back to Eric Peterson. It's nearly 10 seconds. Right now, he's just staying out and making sure that if a caution happens, he's covered. You know? Rather than coming in and potentially playing into everyone else's hands. Don't you see Robert Maleska say he was pitting? I think Maleska's coming back in.
He might be actually pitting now rather than pitting with 2 to go. As we calculated, he could not make it to the finish of this race without hitting pit road at least one more time. And you talk about the possibility of Rick Ravon, you know, strategizing in case a caution comes out. We've only got 5 cars on the lead lap right now, so that means we would only theoretically have 6 with the addition of the lucky dog if we end up having a late race restart.
Well, plus waiver rounds, because you would get those I mean, potentially there's potential for the 5 cars that are still on the lead lap, other than Rick Ravon, to just not pit. But Ravon's just gonna stay out. Like, he doesn't. The thing in Ravon's head right now is that what does he gain by pitting? Nothing. What does he lose by pitting? Nothing. So keep running it. Whilst ever you're not gaining or losing anything, just stay out. There is no reason for him to come to pit road yet.
Here's the interesting thing, too. Just the pace he is setting. That last time by, 42.378. His fastest lap was a 42.25. So he's only running, what, maybe a 1/10.5 slower than his fastest lap? I mean, tire fall-off doesn't really seem to be much of a factor in hindering his speed.
He's been in clear air most of the race as well, especially during the green flag sections of the race. He's had nobody, taking away his arrow, so there's been no one really compromising him. Peterson's actually running really slow at this point in time. His last lap was a 42.957, so basically a 43. So Peterson's in trouble. I'm wondering where did Stafford come out? So Stafford's come out a mile and a half back up the road from Peterson. I don't think Peterson took tires. I think Peterson came down, took the splash he needed to get home.
According to the telemetry I've got, he hasn't pitted yet. We're waiting on him and Rick Ravon still to complete this cycle. Ravon's been out there for 23 laps on this stint. Peterson was about to complete his 24th lap as he dives into pit road.
Right, so I'm just having a look at the times at this stage. Bronson Stafford, 42.269. Nick De Groot, 42.367. De Groot is 2.2 seconds up the road. 15, 16, actually we're about 16 to 17, 18 laps sort of left in the race. So there's an opportunity here for Bronson Stafford to catch De Groot. If Bronson Stafford makes up another half to 3/4 of a second, he'll be back in the draft and he'll actually run down Nick De Groot. But he's got to run phenomenal pace and there can't be really any mistakes from him. Plus where Peterson plays himself out in terms of this. So actually Stafford's going to fly by Peterson.
It really all comes down to really almost turning qualifying lap times now for
Oh, look at Wagner! Guys. Wagner's jumped Peterson!
Yes, he has. Wagner up to 4th place as you see Peterson leaving pit road. So, boy, that undercut certainly worked out for him. Now, here's the thing, though. As we're watching, the interval between Bronson Stafford and Nick De Groot, there's a difference of 4 lap pressure tires advantage for Stafford. Peterson's going to have about 15 laps to be able to cut down about a 2-second gap between himself and Matt Wagner. There's 9 laps of difference between the tires on the 11 and 36.
Yes, there's an opportunity there as well, and that's really telling for Alec Peterson, and this is the exact strategy that Wagner and De Groot were talking about and they were playing themselves into. The thing from this period right now to the tail end of the race is that De Groot is ailing this entire period. De Groot and Wagner both ailing this entire period, and there is nothing they can do about that whatsoever, but they're comfortable with that. They can run that pace, they've been running that pace all day. It puts the pressure back onto the other people. It's basically saying, I'm going to be out here, I'm going to be turning consistent laps. They may not be the quickest laps ever, but they're going to be consistent. You guys have to come out and turn qualifying laps for the entire remainder of the race, or we win.
And it's interesting, too, because I was going to mention about, these drivers having to try and turn qualifying laps for the remainder of this race. We ended up seeing Robert Maleska III snipe the pole position from Nick de Groot by 11 1/1000ths of a second. So if it's that close for the pole position, that might be all you gain in the course of a lap, which puts the stress on consistent lap times for those drivers that are trying to take advantage of their fresh tires to the driver that they might be trying to catch before this race is over.
And here's the thing, just have a look at the last lap times as these guys are now heading down towards turn 3 as well. Nick de Groot, 42.444, slowest of this bunch. Bronson Stafford, 42.338. Yeah, a little bit quicker. Made a little bit of time there. Matt Wagner, 42.255. The guy with the oldest tires of the bunch is turning the fastest lap.
Matt Wagner actually has the fastest lap of the race as well with a 42.106. That is... well, really, it's actually leaps and bounds over the other drivers that have the fastest laps, which would be Bronson Stafford with a 1:41 and Maleska with a 1:42. That's 4 100ths difference, pretty much, his lap time as opposed to them. Now, obviously, draft could come into play with that when they were all bunched up, but nonetheless, Wagner has pretty much shown, even though he's off pit sequence, he's got himself a fast machine, and, of course, riding the momentum off that victory he had a couple of weeks ago at the Watkins Glen Road Course.
Here's the thing, Seth. Here is the big thing. De Groot hasn't given the draft back to Bronson Stafford yet. You know what? Stafford is just about offering the draft to Matt Wagner, so watch those lap times come down. This is the most crucial factor of the race. Let's keep an eye on these lap times. De Groot, 42.405. Stafford, 42.315. Alright, 900ths of a second. That's a good gain for Stafford at this point in time. He gets himself into the draft, that steps up again. Look at Matt Wagner, 42.290. It was only 2.5 hundredths that time, but still taking time out of him, and now he's going to start getting draft support. Wagner's in a phenomenal spot here.
We've seen a lot of races this season, in this very young season, really shake up the point standings, especially up at the top of the board. I think Pocono is going to be no exception. Obviously, Rick Ravon, if he's able to close out what he's been able to do so far here today and pick up that victory, he's going to have a pretty sizable points gap going into Auto Club next week. But Nick de Groot, I think he'll move up to second. Wagner will move up to third. Bronson Stafford, with the run he's got right now, he may be moving up to 4th position. It'll really be interesting to see with Henry Bennett down in 13th, Robert Maleska III in 14th, where they're going to end up in the points results heading into next week.
Yeah, I'm just having a quick look as well. Ravon's just caught the back end of this pack. You want to know his lap pace? 42.160 last time by. So, look, basically the only thing that means that any of these guys are going to have a shot at Ravon is if the worst possible happens. And I mean, he is in traffic, so look, it's a possibility. But yeah, look, I mean, this is phenomenal. Wagner is still coming. Have a look at the lap times. Bronson Stafford, are you ready for this? 42.265. Matt Wagner, have a guess.
265 as well, possibly?
266.
Oh.
It is spicy. Yeah, these guys are going head to head. Both of these guys want it. They want it. They want to win this thing. They want this P2. They both want to be on the podium as well. Because you got to remember, this is the fight for the tail end of the podium spot. They're going to creep up on De Groot as well. Oh, have a look at the lap time difference this time by. Are you ready? De Groot 353, Stafford 349. My word. And Wagner with a 282. Wagner the best of the bunch here.
It's about 3 seconds separating second back to 4th position. About a second and a half, actually a second and 4/10 from car to car and then from car to car. It all really just comes down to which one runs down the car ahead of them the quickest? Is it going to be Wagner reeling in Stafford, or if it's going to be Stafford reeling into Groot? Who knows? With 8 laps left, with how long it takes for them to get around this 2.5-mile speedway, we could have ourselves a 3-car fight for the runner-up spot in our hands on the final lap.
Okay, so Wagner finally was the slowest car in this chain. And the other thing is, these guys have shaken off Eric Peterson. Peterson was in this. And he's no longer in this. This is it. He's done. You know, so... Robert Maleska just come out on the radio and said, I'm saving pretty big right now, so I think he's trying to get to the end of the race.
I think he is too. He actually just gave up a lead lap to Rick Rayvon. Jim Herrick there in the 40 machine. 2 laps down now with Rayvon bypassing him. So now up ahead, pretty clear racetrack. It's a ways before you get, I believe that's to the 007 of Henry Bennett for Rick Rayvon. He's got only 7 more circuits to make around Pocono.
Yeah, so he's cruising. I mean, he's happy. To be perfectly honest, Bennett may just let Rayvon ply because that's an extra lap worth of fuel that he doesn't save as well, with a margin from him back to Maleska. The reason Maleska's happy to let that spot go is just to the leader, and let the leader, it's another lap of fuel he doesn't have to save, another lap he doesn't really have to worry about. So he's really happy to see that. Wagner, oh my word, Stafford's had a slow lap actually in this battle pack, and Wagner's really chased him down.
Last time by 42.339 to Stafford's 4.02. I'm also noticing as well here about Wagner's saving. I'll be impressed if he's able to make it back to the start-finish line. Now, granted, you pointed out with him being lapped now, that's one last lap that he would have to save to be able to get back to the checkered flag, but he's been out there for 22 circuits with 6 laps to go. The furthest we've seen a driver go so far on a fuel run is about 27 laps, so he's right on the cusp of being able to make it back, and it may be on fumes.
I think he's just given up the ghost. He's recognized that he's not going to get anything further out of this race, so he's just, it's give it up, make it home, do what we can. Just take your points, move on. There's nothing really he can do. He doesn't have the power right now to respond to anything, so yeah, he's just going to make it home. Oh my word. You know what? I think Stafford's tires are starting to fall off the cliff. He's just at 42.5. And De Groot is suddenly, the lap times from De Groot, 42.305, Wagner 42.306. So we've seen multiple times this chain run similar lap times. I'm wondering as well, the other side of this coin is that can Stafford make it on fuel? Yes, he can. Actually, he's a guaranteed. Alternatively, is Stafford going to try and let Wagner take him here and use the draft and use these two working together to maybe get on De Groot? Surely not. Surely you don't want to fight with a car with a couple laps to go. That's suicide, right?
Well, I would certainly think so. And the thing that really surprises me, too, the fact that Stafford wasn't able to close up on De Groot and instead is getting reeled in by Wagner, is if you look at those 3 drivers that were focused on there from 2nd through 4th, Stafford has the freshest tires out of all of them. He's got about 4 lap fresher tires than De Groot, 5 lap fresher tires than Matt Wagner, and yet it's looking like Wagner may be the fastest of these 3 cars.
And ultimately, remember what De Groot and Wagner were saying about their pit strategy, right? Is that they had an idea, they had a number in the back of their head, they were playing to their number, and they were doing all they can to make that happen. So, look, I mean, this is just skill. All skill right here from these guys. Nick De Groot is he's such a phenomenal driver. And I mean, at the end of the day, there's a little bit of history between him and Stafford. I mean, you throw it back a couple weeks ago with teammates, with Mike Tellier, Bronson Stafford holding down the lead, and De Groot trying to very aggressively get by them on fresher tires and set sail off into the race lead and potentially a race win, actually make contact. So I'm pretty sure that Stafford would want to respond for that, and I'm pretty sure he would want to pay back. So for this to go in the complete opposite direction, he won't be happy about this. He's covered himself off a little bit to Matt Wagner. He's just taken a chunk back out on Matt Wagner, but it's going to be Matt Wagner and Bronson Stafford to the end, Seth.
It looks like it there for that final podium position with 3 laps to go. As a matter of fact, make it 2 laps to go with Rick Rayvon just ticking off another lap there at the start-finish line. So 5 more miles for Rick Rayvon. As we mentioned, the most consistent driver on the season, only 1 finish outside of the top 5 so far this year, and that was a 6th place run. Points leader, but not yet a winner. He's looking to change that here, and I find it really interesting too in the fact that I'm looking back at some of these drivers that really needed good runs and other drivers that have had a lot of momentum. You got Nick De Groot, had that victory a couple of weeks ago, and you've got Bronson Stafford, who's kind of gotten his season turned back around after back-to-back finishes inside the top 10. Matt Wagner with his win at Pocono. Or not Pocono, I'm sorry, make that Watkins Glen. And then you've also got Eric Peterson. I mean, Eric Peterson, if you look at his last couple of finishes, 2 of them up inside the top 10. He's about to tie his best finish on the season, which he had back in Kentucky.
Yeah, and the white flag's in the air here. Have a look at the gap now between Wagner and Stafford. It's down to 0.3 of a second. The other thing is, I just noticed, Stafford is struggling on those tires. He nearly caught the barriers coming off of turn 2. There may be an opportunity here for Wagner. It's going to be close. I think Stafford's got him, but don't say it's over just yet. He's just taken 3/10 out of him in the first sector. Just in turn 1, Seth.
He's right on him as off the final corner, Rick Ravon's going to be taking his first checkered flag of his dark horse career. And here's the battle for third place coming back to the start-finish line.
And someone's in fence. It's Gary Corley. Never mind. Ignore that. Stafford is out of fuel.
I am shocked. Did he not take a full tank? Our numbers had him being able to make it another, 6 to 7 laps. How is he out of fuel at this point? He must have not taken on a full tank of fuel.
Wow. He didn't... he ran out of fuel. He underfueled the car.
Wow. Still a good performance in fourth, but he'll lose out on the final podium spot to Matt Wagner off the final corner coming to the checkered flag. Wagner finishing third behind DeGroot. And DeGroot behind your race winner, Rick Ravon. We said this, I think it was last week, Scott, that we felt it was just a matter of time before we were going to see Rick Ravon burning it down in victory. Well, we didn't have to wait long. 1 week later, he's your winner at Pocono.
It's just, man, wow. And I mean, that's just it. And again, think about Wagner as well, and where Wagner's positioned himself in this championship. This is a guy now that's starting to go from strength to strength. So Matt Wagner has had speed over the last few rounds. So, you know, like you said, momentum, confidence, it all feeds back. Momentum comes from confidence. You know what you want to do with the car, and you're just able to go out there, and you're able to do that. That builds the momentum. Rick Ravon has had that week after week after week. You said it. P6 is his worst finish this season. Every other finish is top 5. He has done everything that he needs to do to get his car in a victory lane and just hasn't been there so far this season. I am so glad that this man gets to burn it down. He's such a lovely personality, and this is a guy that totally deserves it as well.
Matt Wagner offering some congratulations there. I mean, you talk about Wagner momentum. Next week we go to Auto Club, where he's the defending winner. Auto Club was the season opener back in Season 3. It's going to be the 9th race here of Season 4, so we'll see if we can keep that momentum going, and we'll be talking with him as well as Nick DeGroot and our winner, Rick Ravon, in just a moment. We'll take a look here at the finishing results from this race. Only one caution here today, but this race was not without incident after that first yellow flag. As you'll see here outside of the top 10, Henry Bennett with his issue, as well as Robert Maleska III, neither one getting the benefit of a caution coming out, finishing in the 13th and 14th positions. So for the two multi-time winners here, Scott, I mean, what's the mentality got to be now going into Auto Club next week?
Well, I mean, you said that you've got to go back to last season. You've got to start, looking at previous results and go, yes, I'm confident. Yes, I'm comfortable in the car. Ravon, I mean, the last couple weeks, especially these styles of tracks, you got to remember, Pocono is probably a really, really good form guide heading into Auto Club because it's a similar kind of layout. Very bumpy, older track surface. The seams are very sort of similar. He will be comfortable and he will feel at home. Matt Wagner is going to be exactly the same. Another comfortable surface. I think we are going to see another phenomenal battle between Ravon and DeGroot. These guys have been basically locked together, fighting it out all season long. For me, what do I need to see next week? What I need to see from Matt Wagner, I'm going to focus in on him, laser focus on Wagner. Hasn't had a consistent season. I think Wagner needs to go out, qualify strong. If Wagner can do that, I think he's a shot at a win on an oval. So, look, he's got momentum. He's definitely confident. He's definitely driving the car that he needs to be. And if you look at the guys that are the most consistent from road courses to ovals, Matt Wagner is probably consistent across all of the finishes there as well. So, look, Wagner's going to have a really strong performance next week. I think he can be in victory lane as well.
It's interesting. I gave the little nugget earlier on in this race about the fact that the second worst finish last season for Robert Maliska III was a 10th place here at Pocono. And while 10th place sounds great to a lot of drivers with the season he was having, it didn't quite meet up to the standards of what we were used to seeing out of him week after week. Well, gonna spin the web a little bit for next week as well, because it's a 2-mile speedway / super speedway and auto club. We were at Michigan for the season opener, the sister track to Auto Club. That 6th place performance, that one finish outside the top 5 for Rick Ravon, yeah, it was at Michigan. So you got to wonder if he'll be able to finish up inside the top 5 at another 2-mile track. And Robert Maliska III, he was the winner at Michigan. So obviously he would love to be able to get the 2-mile mojo back and go to victory lane for the 4th time this season next week.
But you got to remember that opening race at Michigan, I think, is probably night and day to everything that we've seen across the rest of the season. The fuel numbers were just so wacky and so out there, and Maleska was the only one that made it in terms of that top battle in fuel numbers. It was so different from that sort of a perspective. So when Ravon crosses the line in P6 there, I put in air quotes around that. If that's his worst finish, if that's a P6, that's a P3 everywhere else, So look, ultimately, I think Ravon, I would love to see him go out and win again, because the guy is just a phenomenal form. And ultimately, I think Maleska's confidence will be suffering right now. He'll be really hurting. What he needs to do is reset. He needs to walk away from tonight, go out, do something different for a couple days. Make sure he does not look at iRacing whatsoever. Come back a couple days' time, reset, hunker down, become the most focused and driven driver that you've ever been, because it takes luck to be a champion sometimes. He hasn't got it tonight. He's had a couple of unlucky weeks back to back to back. He needs to turn his season around and quit focusing on luck and start focusing back in on those things that he can do better.
Well, last season, with Pocono only making its 2nd appearance on the Dark Horse Racing Series schedule, Eric Schaus, the inaugural winner, led 21 laps en route to his victory. No doubt about it.
Tell me.
Rick Ravon blew that out of the water here tonight. No, I didn't make a lap prediction this week. I put away my crystal ball after last week. Last week's not going to get topped. Let's see if we can talk with some of our podium finishers here tonight, see what they thought about this 100 lapper, and let's see if we can dial up 3rd place finisher Matt Wagner. Hey Matt, Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. Got us?
Hello, guys. Good to see you again.
All right. Yeah, we talked to you beginning portion of this race around that first caution under pacing. You said that you had a plan, that staying out strategy was something that you had planned for later on in the race. Did it work out the way that you expected? Because obviously, good result out of it.
Obviously, a P3. I'm pretty excited about it. A lot of guys were taking a gamble trying to make it the whole way. I know my teammate Gaia was trying, and he would have been 2 laps short. And I thought he'd stick with the plan, and it all worked out. As far as pace goes, I just didn't have it. Toward the end of the race, I did have it. I finally found my mojo up in turn 3. And I started clicking off some laps. Started gaining on Nick. I'm like, oh gosh darn it! I wish we would have do it over again. I would in a heartbeat.
Well, I was actually watching the sector times there, Matt. You were actually the fastest car coming off turn 3. That was your strong suit towards the tail end of the race. That's where I'm going to be honest. I was looking at Nick DeGroot, and he looked like he was really, really struggling off of turn 3. And it looks that was also where Bronson Stafford was strong. But then you were just always gaining your time off of turn 3. That's the best part about Pocono, though, is that everyone is weak somewhere at Pocono, and it creates phenomenal racing and overtaking fuel strategies. The whole works.
Yeah, like you said, I was looking to my relative. I was gaining. I was like, wow, Nick is pretty slowing up. And me and Nick were chatting in a little room there before we got interviewed here, and said he wished he would have started over again too. He found pace early on, then he lost it toward the end of the race, like you said. Although I had fun, I'm ready to do it again.
That's what it's all about. I mean, obviously, coming into this race, 5th in the point standings, less than 45 points out of the points lead. Now, you're not going to gain a whole lot, I don't think, on Rick Ravon, but you're still up there at least in the same vicinity as him and Nick DeGroot in the finishing results, so you'll still keep them honest going into next week. And it's a track that We ended up talking to you in Victory Lane last season when Auto Club played the season opener. So obviously the confidence level's got to be high going into a track that you're familiar with in terms of winning at, right?
It is my most winningest track in all of iRacing. I think I got over about 25, 30 wins there. It's one of my favorites. Come there, I expect to win and nothing else. It just sucks.
Well, we look forward to seeing if you're going to be able to go back-to-back seasons there at Auto Club next week. But Matt, we're now going to give you the opportunity to do some thank yous and shout out some sponsors.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank HyperX, my team, Area 51, MC Gear, of course, Troy Lee Designs, and all of the staff make this setup possible. It's really fun. I've been living on a dream for the past 3 or 4 weeks, and it's been real. And hopefully, we get to talk to you again in Victory Lane next week. But I hate to sound cocky about it, but that's truly is one of my favorite racetracks. And we'll see
I'm
you
going to
guys
step
later.
in here. I'm going to step in here, Seth.
Please go.
We really, really ever get an opportunity to let have one teammate come in and talk to us from third place, and then his teammate come in at second place. Can we keep Matt around here? I'd actually like to give Matt the opportunity to ask his teammate a question about the race, and then I actually, more importantly, like that. This series is so much fun. Matt, can you give us your best intro for Nick DeGroot as well? Like calling the man, the myth, the legend. I don't know. Come up with something, man. Have some fun with it.
Oh, I'll play a little. I'm long with it. Let's go.
All right, let's see if we can get Nick DeGroot in here.
All right, Matt, hit us with your best intro for Nick.
Nick DeGroot, this is Matt Wagner speaking. You got us?
I gotcha.
Oh man, what a hell of a run you put on there. Tell us about your strategy going in today's race.
Real quick, they should absolutely have the podium finishers interview each other after real life races, because that would be amazing. But yeah, it was a good race. It was very good. Like I wanted to lower redemption for Pocono last season, but we came out there, led some laps, got a little off strategy, led some more laps because of that, and we're able to bring home second. With the extra fuel I had to take and just straight up pace, I did not have the pace there to match Rick throughout the racing. Just kept getting away a little bit more every single run, and at that point I was just kind of defending against second and making sure to manage that gap and hoping manage the gap against third, I guess, and just hoping that maybe something could go wrong with Rick, maybe a speeding penalty, maybe traffic holds him up. But no, he ran a good race after that, and he got the W, and we got another second place finish. So good for points, but I'd much rather be in Victory Lane.
I was actually kind of hoping that Matt would be like, yeah, it's the man, the myth, it's Nick, it's little Nicky himself, it's Nick DeGroot, but hey, look, I'll go. Because sometimes it's fun. You learn a lot more about your drivers when you get them to interview each other, right?
But I'm going to say something here. Go out on a limb here. This man right here, I've respected pretty much, a lot in the IndyCar community. He brings a lot to the Fix series here in iRacing, and he's the fastest guy. He's the guy to beat. So if you beat this man, you've done something.
Oh, Robert, you out there? You out there? Robert Molesca is no longer the measure.
I ain't talking about Robert. I'm talking about Nick. I'm talking about through all the years, man.
Yeah, I do love those fixed races. I run them all the time. Only the big ovals, though. Not gonna lie, the short ovals, they kind of scare me.
I gotta ask you both here. I'm
Go
gonna
ahead.
ask like a dual question here too, because we got the both of them in here, and both of them played the same strategy back under the only caution. I mean, we ended up seeing not too long after that restart, guys that are up there in the top 5 with you in points, like Henry Bennett and Robert Maliska III, run into issues and the caution not come out to save them. So did that make you feel a little bit better about your strategy, just based on the fact that with being out in front, not really back in that mayhem, it actually put you guys in a better position to not get caught up in that incident, because that was around the 3rd place when that contact took place.
Yeah, that was a really unfortunate incident there with Henry, Rob, and Rick, and you'd never like to see a teammate get in trouble, of course, and it, of course, helped us. But I think even without that incident, we were sitting in a pretty good spot because we had Matt out there. I was, and he probably noticed this, I was kind of using him to keep them at bay. They would go under him, I'd take their, and then I'd give them a draft down the straight, and I was kind of using him to keep them all from getting to me, and in turn getting him. So it kind of just worked out that way, having the 2 cars up there. But yeah, we would have liked to raced it out with all 4 of them there. Rick, myself, Henry, and Rob. But it is what it is. Incidents happen. It's racing.
Still, at the end of the day, like that was actually one of the more exciting races. I mean, talk to us about probably the last 10 laps. If Bronson Stafford doesn't run into fuel issues, doesn't underfill the car slightly, I mean, ultimately we're probably talking to him in P3. Would you say so, Matt and Nick? Were you watching? We'll start with Matt first, and then we'll move on to Nick. But Nick, were you watching the relative as well and keeping an eye on Bronson?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You go, Matt.
Go with Matt. Yeah, go with Matt.
Hey, you said me first. But I'm sorry. I apologize. But I was sitting there watching. He was getting the last couple of laps, and he was running the low line, and it was killing his straightaway speed. And I said, if I do it here, I'll pretty much pass him here. And going to turn 3, and then all of a sudden I look to my left. I'm like, oh. He maybe would have had me. Maybe. I have no idea. Only time will tell if he had more fuel. It would have been close.
But there was about 10 laps there in the middle of that last run, Nick, whereby Bronson was actually catching you as well.
Yeah, I wasn't too concerned with him, to be honest. I got a little close to that wall at the beginning of the run, and at that point was like, okay, calm down, Nick. Just, you have a little more in the bank. Just kind of manage this gap, and he was closing in. And not gonna lie, when he got within 2 seconds, I started to push a little bit, and he wasn't really going anywhere, but it did stabilize. So I wasn't too concerned, but I was absolutely watching because he had some pretty good pace today, and definitely deserved to be up there battling with us.
All right, well, Nick, obviously another good performance for you, coming off the heels of that win you had a couple of weeks ago at Kentucky, getting closer to trying to get that points lead as you're looking for your second championship here in this league as well. We're going to now turn the mic over to you for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Yeah, as always, Factory Back Motorsports, CoveyMore.com, Motorsport.com, Cowboy Ship, Blaze Pod, HyperX, and shout out to Covey too. Good to have him back in the car this week. Get a nice top 10 finish. I think he led a couple laps there during the cycle stop, so good to have him back, and looking forward to the next one.
What are you thinking, Scott? Do we keep the chain going? Do we have Nick introduce the race winner here?
Let's do it. I think Rick Ravon would get an absolute kick out of it. Nick, you what are you going to call him? Is it Little Ricky? Little Nicky and Little Ricky?
I have no idea. Oh man, I'll come with something.
I'm going to let Nick do this because I have more confidence in him doing it than Todd. So here we go.
We are now joined by the race winner, the Double R's, Rick Ravon, number 2 machine, but he was number 1 today. Welcome to the broadcast, Rick. Tell us about how you beat us all today.
For the love of God, is that Nick DeGroot interviewing me?
Yes, sir.
Well, isn't that awesome? How you doing?
I'm doing good. We got a little thing going on tonight. All the finishers are finishing the guys who beat them.
Well, okay, that sounds good to me. I'm sorry to get back to your question.
So who's Rick gonna interview?
I don't know. Who finished?
Rick gets to interview Seth and I.
Got the top 3.
Boy.
Who's left?
But seriously, Rick, that was a phenomenal race from you tonight. I mean, you had everyone covered. What was the gap at the end? 6-7 seconds? What a race, man!
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, especially considering I totally blew qualifying, so we started dead last, which I don't think I've ever started dead last in my entire 26-year-long sim racing career. So that was definitely a first. But
okay, honey, I gotta go to bed.
all right, that's my wife. Hi, honey.
I love you. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, can we interview Rick's wife? Are we allowed to do that?
We got a fan.
Yeah, go ahead.
I couldn't be more proud of this man who has been racing for 26 plus years, and he freaking took it tonight. And I knew he was going to, and I told him over the last week, I said, this is going to be your race tonight.
All right. No, you say that before every race, though, honey.
No,
Come on.
I told you. But you know what? This is your new league. I said, bide your time.
Okay, honey, wrap it up.
Love you.
No. I want to keep it here because I was actually about to ask her, what's the mood been like in your household for the last couple of weeks? Because ultimately, Rick, and it's something we said a lot in the commentary tonight, was that you've been going from strength to strength to strength the last couple of weeks. Your consistency has been on point.
The question is, what has the mood been?
It has been happy, and it has been happy and positive, and me reinforcing that. I said, you just bide your time. You're gonna get that win with this league because you are like phenomenal. You are awesome. You are like amazing, and you're a perfectionist. And you just he should be racing in like the real world.
Oh, come on. I'm not that good.
Yeah,
Crying
you
out
are.
loud.
Yeah, you are.
Mrs. Ravon to join the league when we get around to Christmas this year. I think she's getting a sim rig set up.
Oh boy.
You did awesome. Congratulations. Good night, everybody. Love you. Goodbye.
Okay, goodbye, honey.
Bye.
All right, get out of here. Leave
So-
me alone. Go to bed. Go wait for me in bed.
Seth, when have you ever interviewed a competitor's wife before? That's a first for me.
That
We-
has
we-
to be
we
a
joke
first for
around,
me.
by the
I
way.
do believe. I think that is a first for me. I've heard fans in the background before, but I've never actually gotten the opportunity to interview them.
We joke around, by the way. We always kid around, so that wasn't like vicious.
I can tell. You guys have a great time. Have very happily married.
But I mean, again, yeah. Get back to the race tonight, Rick. I mean, ultimately, it was a strong performance, and like I said, that consistency. Seth and I both looked at each other tonight and said, "This guy's coming to victory lane. It's a matter of time. It will happen this season. It's just a matter of time."
Well, I need you guys to say that during every race, then, if that's the case, because yeah, that definitely worked out. I mean, like I said, the Gould charge was just hooked up. You know, I love Pocono. This is really my home track because I'm from New Jersey, and a lot of kart history here. I'm an old time, kart guy, and I love racing this place, and I love racing these guys because they're so good, they're so competitive, and they race so clean. I mean, come on, one yellow flag tonight. We had 0 at Michigan earlier in the season. Nick DeGroot is phenomenal. Matt Wagner is so on point. Stafford, Peterson, all of these guys, man. Maleska and Bennett. And all of these guys, it's just such a pleasure to race these guys. They race you hard, they race you clean, and that's what it's all about, baby.
First win of his career here in the Dark Horse Racing Series, and take place here tonight at the Tricky Triangle of Pocono. Congratulations, Rick. We're now going to give you the opportunity for some Victory Lane thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Okay, I want to thank my sponsor, Gould Electronics. Thanks so much for giving me $10,000 a race. Yeah, okay. I want to give a shout to Dave Cook and Dan Gurney Jr. because they were with me, cheering me on, and you guys are awesome. I appreciate the support, and we'll probably do a little bit of racing later tonight. I want to thank my wife, obviously, for her support. In case you couldn't tell, she's a huge supporter, which definitely helps because when I'm sim racing, she knows to just kind of leave me alone. That's why she comes down after the race. My daughters, Mila and Zoe, I love you guys with all my heart. I want to thank the drivers. I want to thank the guys that own this league. I want to thank FRN and everybody here in the booth for doing the broadcasts. I want to thank the people that are watching and supporting this league. Thanks so much for your support too. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank the Lord Jesus. I love you so much, Lord Jesus. Thank you.
That's Rick Ravon, your winner here tonight at Pocono. Rick, Nick, Matt, congrats on the podium finishes. Thanks for being good sports in the rather unorthodox post-race interview here for us.
That was quite the experience to interview Nick like that.
Yes, it was.
That's pretty cool.
Congrats, Rick, and good race, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nick, and looking forward to next week, guys.
Yeah, best
Yes,
of luck
sir.
to you guys next week at Auto Club. Looking forward to that one.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be a good one.
That's going to conclude our coverage here tonight from Pocono Raceway. I mean, they call it the Tricky Triangle, so I guess we'll call this the Tricky Post-Race Show. I mean, I don't think anybody had any idea, myself included, that we were going to be doing something like that, but that was a blast of just, because you're right, because you actually do glean a little bit more information with driver to driver with the post-race interview there as well, so pretty cool to be able to hear those guys be able to interview their fellow competitors and get a little bit more information that maybe they might have played a little bit more closer to the chest had it not been a fellow competitor interviewing them. So that's going to conclude tonight's race here
Never
from
mind.
Pocono.
I'm here now.
You are here now. I
I was gonna say,
wondering.
my
Radio
microphone's
silence.
muted. I had it down.
Ah.
I'm like talking to you. I'm like answering your questions. I'm sitting over here like, oh, okay, he's ignoring. Never mind. Okay, yeah, but no, seriously. I
I
mean,
thought you went on strike. I thought you thought
I'm
those
done.
guys were going to take over the show now.
I'm done. I quit. This show is now run by the drivers. No, seriously though. I mean, thing that I always say is that we can give you a really good wide angle view and a really good overall and general view of the race, but the drivers are always going to give you a lot better focused. And they're going to see things that are going on. They know their fuel numbers. They know their tire strategies, those sorts of things. So ultimately, whenever you're in a situation like this, I always want to talk to the drivers to driver stuff because you're going to get a lot more detail than we can ever provide because it's just not available to us, at the end of the day. So look, and ultimately the mood that come out of that race and come out of that interview session as well is exactly what I love about Dark Horse Racing. It's close, it's tight racing, but you can hear it. All three of those guys are loving it. They're loving racing each other and they're loving everything that's going on. And ultimately Dark Horse is a big success because of it.
Absolutely. Now, we touched a little bit already on Auto Club next week, and you brought up the point about even though they're sister tracks, you expect that we're going to be seeing two entirely different races from what we saw earlier on in the season opener as to what we're going to see next week. But is the one constant going to be those names up there at the front? I mean, Matt Wagner, he said that's his house. He's got a lot of wins there at Auto Club. He goes in there with the mentality that he is going to win that race. Do we see him? Do we see Nick DeGroot, Maleska, Bennett? Do those guys, do they keep themselves up there at the front? Or do we kind of see maybe a super speedway type mentality where we see some of these guys that might be running mid-pack at the 1.5 miles in the road courses, they make their way up to the front and maybe see another different race winner this season?
Look, it's definitely an option. I mean, especially with the IndyCar package, Auto Club is definitely a higher speed course, and Michigan. Look, I do say that we're going to see two different styles of races, and certainly with the names that we're going to see. But I think it's going to be overall a similar kind of race, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Ultimately, at the start of Michigan, you had a lot of these guys that are new to each other, racing around each other for the first time, as you do generally with the start of any new season with any league, ever, right? You've got guys that are learning to race each other, and I think we saw that a lot at Michigan. Whereas in the early stages at Michigan, I think we saw a couple cautions quite early on. That's just natural. Guys just getting used to each other, racing around each other. We're now, a fair chunk into the season. We've had some phenomenal racing. We've had long green flag runs back to back to back to back now. So the race style that we're gonna see at Auto Club is gonna be very different from that standpoint. You have to go into it with a different mindset. You know that there's gonna be extended green flag runs, and you have to prepare for that.
Very interesting that last season, 7 races into the schedule, we had 6 different drivers that had gone to victory lane, and here we're going to have, 5 different drivers that went to victory lane, and here, heading into next week, we're going to be having a total of 6 different drivers that have gone to victory lane. I mean, Matt and I mentioned this earlier on in the broadcast. I mean, the drivers have even mentioned it week after week. The competition, it has stepped up from front to back of this pack, and we are definitely seeing that here, and we're in a very young season. We're not even at the halfway portion of this season here. Is next week, we're going to be at the Auto Club Speedway in California, and that will be playing host to race number 9 on the season. Hope you guys will join us for that, as the green flag will be scheduled to fly next Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Should be a good one there. It was a great one here tonight at Pocono. Scott, appreciate you joining the booth.
Oh, mate, another phenomenal race. I'll be back again next week, hands down. Hopefully this time. I remember what time the race starts. Oh, it's so bad for me, Seth.
Time zones, they get you every time. I
Yeah.
appreciate Matt Rodriguez joining me as well earlier on in this one to be able to cover until Scott was able to get in here. But looking forward once again to next week at Auto Club Speedway here for the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lee Designs. Final race winner here tonight is Rick Ravon with his first career win in the series. For Scott Rankin, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flat Out Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flat Out Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flat Out Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flat Out Racing Network would like to thank you for your support